Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Zabricki, and I'm a Learning Solutions Specialist with Macmillan Learning. And I've also taught both online and face-to-face classes at the community college and the university level. Today, I'd like to talk to you about Sapling and how it can help as you're transitioning your course from face-to-face to online. But before we do that, I wanted to share a metaphor that had been recently shared with me that I found really useful and makes a whole lot more sense about the situation. Okay. So I don't know if you're like me, but I am a terrible flyer. I know flying is safe. I know the aerodynamics behind flying, and I usually do a Google check just to see where turbulence is wherever I'm flying to. But I get so much anxiety when I fly every time because I hate turbulence. No matter how many times people tell me the phrase, it's like the bumps on the road, it doesn't reassure me because I keep thinking that the road's going to open up with a sinkhole and my car's going to fall right through. But I do notice that my anxiety goes down a lot when the pilot comes on the intercom in advance of any turbulence and says, hey, it's going to be a little bit bumpy, but what we're going to do is try to climb out of this and find some smoother air. I'm sure the pilot hates turbulence as much as I do, but by the pilot saying that, it makes me feel like there was an expectation set and that we're all in this together, and I can prepare myself mentally for that road ahead. And that's kind of how I feel about this daunting task you and I have with our students as we move our face-to-face classes to a fully online experience. There's no way around it being different, and the pathway to the end of the quarter or semester may be even bumpier, but if we set the proper expectations, we're all going to get through this together. And you can think of Macmillan as your flight crew. We're here to help, and we're here for your safety. Unfortunately, because this webinar is a short call, like a puddle jumper, we won't be serving refreshments. That's up on you. That's all on you. But this is the plan that I'd like to cover with you today. Here's our flight plan. So what I'd like to do is make 3 passes in Sapling. So the first one, our takeoff, what I'm going to do is show you basic Sapling functionality. The second pass, what we're going to do is take a look at our learning curve reading quizzes, the pre-lecture stuff, and our homework assignments. These are out-of-the-box assignments that are ready to go and ready for you to assign to students today. So that's our cruising altitude. When we start our initial descent, that's when we're going to talk about how do we make a quiz or an exam in the Sapling system. And as we prepare for landing, I'm going to mention some things that you want to check out or think about as you're developing your course as time goes on. And then finally, when we touch down at our destination, that's where we're going to talk about where to find additional help. And if there's any questions or answers, we can definitely discuss that. All right. So that being said, let's take a look at a Sapling course. Okay, so I pulled up a Sapling course already. So this is actually our brand new genetics course, Introduction to Genetic Analysis by Griffiths. This is the 12th edition. Now, some of you, as you're going through the course, you may have everything broken out into chapters, and you may see that there's a lot of resources like this title. You may have a course, however, that when you're going through the course, you may have just homework assignments. Okay, so that's okay. You still have relatively the same functionality. The only difference is that some of you may have a normal Sapling course, which is just homework, and some of you may have a Sapling Plus course that has a lot more resources. So for today, what I'm going to do is show you a Sapling Plus course. Now, before we go any further, I do kind of want to give you a heads up as to what to expect. Like, for instance, as we're going through the page, you may notice that you have some links here in blue. You've got some materials grayed out, and then you've got this link down below that's green. So here's the color scheme. Anything that's blue or green, any link that's blue or green means that it's live to students right now. Anything grayed out is only available to instructors. Okay. Now, another thing that I'd like to also point out is that if we look at the top of the page, over here on the right-hand side margin, you have a picture of the textbook cover. This is actually the link to the online ebook that students can access. Okay, so students can definitely access the textbook directly through Sapling. Okay. Now, as you're going through the course, one final thing before we get into the heart of the course is that you're going to have a practice assignment. And some courses may also have a video that introduces students to Sapling learning. This practice assignment is really important because this is getting your students into our system and they learn how to input their answers, whether that's typing scientific notation, typing exponents, drag and drop or sort or label, or answer all kinds of questions. It's meant to be an easy assignment. We strongly recommend that you would require this assignment for a nominal amount of points, like 5 points or so. They're easy points, but what it's doing on the back end is double checking to make sure your browser's up to date, and if there's any plugins, that they're working properly as well. So if you're going to have a technology fail, you're going to have it right here, and this is something that we can help students correct. Okay, so that being said, let's jump into a chapter. So let's go to chapter 1. All right, so as you're going through your Sapling Plus course, you will have a combination of assignments. All right, so you will have a learning curve activity, you'll have a reading quiz, and then you're going to have homework. Homework is meant to be post-lecture. Okay, so just like the title infers, it's meant to be post-lecture. That would be what you would assign after a lecture. Now you'll have a learning curve and a reading quiz. These two are meant to be post-lecture. What learning curve is, and we're going to dive into this in a lot more detail, learning curve is our adaptive system. It's getting students to read and comprehend what they're reading. Okay, the reading quiz also is meant to be pre-lecture, but instead of being adaptive, the reading quiz is straight multiple choice. Okay, so let's dive in and talk a little bit about these 3 assignments. So what I'm going to do is click on a link to learning curve. Okay, so as we get into the course, this is what the instructor side of learning curve will look like. Now, you and your students may find learning curve particularly helpful right now for a few reasons. Learning curve is a formative activity where questions are tagged to the different parts of the chapter and students need to work their way through to hit the target activity score. Think of it like completing the level in a video game, but you're just reading a chapter out of a textbook. So let's preview this as a student. So what I'm going to do is go to the upper right-hand corner and click Preview as a Student. And then down below, I'm going to click Begin Activity. So this gives you the question. So you can notice in the upper, almost at the top of the screen, the question value here is set at 15 points. So, and that seems to be the baseline number of points per question. Now, if I try to answer this question and I get it incorrect, you'll notice that the question value went from 15 points down to 5 points. So at this point, I can still earn 5 points for getting this question correct in the second try. And if I get it incorrect again, I can try to get 2 points for getting it correct in the third try. I never lose points. I can just earn less points towards that target activity score. So think of it as, it's always a formative step forward, albeit just a small step sometimes. Now that being said, if I don't know the answer right off the bat, the main strategy the system will use is to nudge students to actually read the ebook page. So if I click on this button down at the bottom of the screen that says read the ebook page on this topic, the textbook will appear on the right-hand side of the screen, and it will drop students off on the page where this is being discussed in the text. Now, 9 times out of 10, what's kind of cool is that it's going to drop you off on the section of the page where it's going to be discussed. Okay. Now, students are not penalized for reading the ebook, and in fact, you may have seen the published research that shows that students' retention is up to 3 times higher than when they're reading with the question in mind. So after finding the answer, they can go back to the question and try to answer it. And they can answer the question for the full amount of points. Now, students like learning curve because as long as they don't give up, they can work their way through the problems. And the system is adaptive with the questions tagged by different sections and difficulty levels, so the students cannot rely on knowledge from only one part of the chapter to carry them through the entire assignment. The system will eventually start pushing them along, so that way they are exposed to the entire chapter. Now let's go back to that study plan. Okay, so what I'm going to do is click on the link at the top left of your screen, and now we get to see the individualized study plan for each student, for us as the student. Now, another reason that students like Learning Curve is that it does give them a personalized study plan based on how they did. It will direct them to the sections that they were weaker in and show them any additional resources or videos or anything like that. So all you have to do is click on one of these links, and it's going to show you everything that's available to you to get that help. Okay. So these resources, these additional resources and videos and ebook sections may be available in those areas that they need more help. So those tend to be the reasons why Learning Curve tends to be more popular. Now, what I'm going to do is end this preview, and we're going to go back to the instructor side of Learning Curve. So there are a few reasons, especially now, that you might find assigning Learning Curve to be helpful. First, students who do complete the Learning Curve activities tend to show up to lecture better prepared to engage, whether that's a face-to-face lecture, or in this case, virtual, or even a course that's delivered in an asynchronous manner. Another helpful thing is that Learning Curve will help you take the temperature of the classroom, even though you don't have your normal classroom. Now, one more thing I want to show you is how the reporting is going to look to you as the instructor. So what I'm going to do is populate this course with some sample students. And so we've got a class of 5 students. You can see that 3 of these students have actually completed the assignment, but you've got 2 still working. What we're looking at on the right-hand side, you can actually see how your class is doing as an aggregate, or let's say we want to check out how Marie Curie is doing. She's still working towards her target score. So if I click on Marie Curie, we get to see where she's at in the learning process. So knowing how students are doing broken down by section will be helpful, especially when they start emailing you or if you are holding virtual office hours. So all that being said, Learning Curve is going to be your most valuable and most thorough and easiest to assign activity that's right out of the box. You don't really have to make any changes to it. So that's our Learning Curve activity. Again, it's our adaptive system. The goal of Learning Curve is to get students to read and comprehend what they're reading. Now, because it is adaptive, okay, because it is an adaptive system, the one downside to Learning Curve is that you will not have absolute control over the questions themselves. You have control as to which topic you want to test students from, but the moment that you start specifying which questions students are going to answer in Learning Curve, you start to lose the reliability of the reporting, both for the students and the instructors. So if having absolute control on the questions is vitally important to you, that's where this reading quiz comes in. It's built similar to the Learning Curve. It's going to have mainly multiple choice questions, somewhere between 5 to 20 multiple choice questions. They're going to be low-level reading comprehension questions, and you do have some control on how the questions are worded, so you can create or edit the questions and duplicate them and make them your own. But if you do want that absolute control, you do have the reading quiz. All right, so that being said, the Learning Curve and the reading quiz are meant to be that pre-lecture activity. And ideally, we'd want you to use one of these 2 assignments along with the homework. So let's now check out the homework activity. Okay. So this is going to take you directly to the instructor side of the homework activity, homework assignment. Okay. Each question in the homework activity is going to be listed as a line on this table. Now you're going to notice that one column, the biggest column of all, has no label on top. This is called the title and description column. This is going to give you a really good sense of the question before you see the question yourself. So for instance, let's go down to line number 4. In line number 4, the title says Chargas rule. Chargas rules. The description reads, draw conclusions about DNA composition given the proportions of each nitrogenous base and double-stranded DNA. So before you even see the question yourself, you have a pretty good indication of what this question is asking. Okay. Now, what's kind of cool is that if we go one column over to the right, we get to see what level of Bloom's taxonomy this question falls into. So this is actually a level 4 analyzing question. Okay. What I'm going to do is now go 2 columns over to the right, and now we can see the question type, so that we know that this is going to be a multiple selection question. So what's really cool is that before we even see the question, we know where this question's going. We know what this question's essentially testing, and then we also know the style of the question, that this is going to be a multiple select question. So now I'm going to go back to that title and description column, and this time I'm going to go 1 column over to the left this time to this image. And what I'm going to do is click on that image. So we get to see the question itself. And because we're still in instructor mode, we're going to see the solution to that question. Okay. Now, each question in the Sapling library, the question bank, will have 3 things in common with each other. To show you that, I'm going to turn on this toggle switch over here in the upper right-hand corner, this one that says show feedback. By turning it on, we get to see the very first thing that each question will have. So in this case, you're going to have a detailed solution for each and every question. Okay. And usually our content team writes this solution from the point of view of, let's say you had absolutely no clue on how to answer this question. At least by reading the solution, you're going to gain an appreciation of where this question is coming from. So that way, if you're faced with this again, you'll be able to answer this question. At least be able to, you'll have a better chance of getting this question correct. Okay. In the upper left-hand corner, we have this tab that says question view. So let's click on this. So let's move off of the solution. Let's check out the question view. And now on the right-hand side of the screen, you actually see the second thing that each question will have in common. Each question will have at least 1 hint per question. And there's no penalty to open up the hint. The hint is there for students to use, or they don't have to use. It's really up to them. Finally, for each and every question inside the Sapling system, there's going to be feedback based on what students are putting into the system. And so over here in the upper left-hand corner, we have this incorrect feedback tab. And what I'm going to do is click on this. This is actually a drop-down bar where we can scroll through each of the incorrect feedbacks that's been programmed for each question. Okay, so every question in the Sapling homework side is going to have those 3 things in common with each other. There will be at least 1 hint per question. There will be feedback based on what students are putting into the system. And then there's going to be a detailed solution written from the point of view of you had absolutely no clue on how to answer this question. At least you'll gain an appreciation of where this question is coming from. Okay, so that being said, where are these questions actually really coming from? How do we populate these assignments? So what we're gonna check that out, but I do want to make a point about best practices here. Inside your Sapling course, you're going to have a homework assignment that's already been curated for you. It's going to have questions populated in there. Okay. Because time is of the essence and you won't have a whole lot of time to get this course live to students, what I would strongly recommend for your first time around is to use the homework assignment either as is or use it as a scaffold to build the assignment to the point that you're happy with it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is show you how do we add questions and how do we remove questions from a homework assignment. To do that, we're going to go back to the top of the page where we have these tabs. And what I'm going to do is click on the second tab over on the left. So this is called the question bank. So on the left-hand side of the screen, what we're looking at, these are the question banks that you have available in your account. So right now for the Griffiths textbook, we have about 477 questions. Now there is one really big important thing I want to make a note of right here. These questions are the homework questions. Some of your textbooks may have the test bank already loaded inside your Sapling course. A lot of times in life sciences, the test bank will be completely separate from the question bank. Okay, so what I did was open the Griffiths folder, and it's going to be all sorted by chapter. So if I go into chapter 1 here, we'll see that there's 15 questions. Everything is going to be broken down into sections. And then if I open a section, things will be broken down by learning objective. Okay, so here I'm at this learning objective, know the experiments by which genetics developed from Mendel to today. Okay, now if I take a look at, let's take a look at question number 3. And this is our unpacking the problem for chapter 1. Excuse me. If I take a look at this question and go, you know, I like this question. This is a really nice question to be asking in the homework. The way I would add this question to the assignment is to click on the check mark box next to each question line. You're going to get a pop-up menu that appears. And what we're going to do is click add. Okay. By clicking the add button, that's going to change the number next to assessment from 15. Now it's at 16. So if I go back to the assessment screen, you do have at the very bottom, you do have that unpacking the problem. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is click on the check mark box next to that question. All right. So now you get that pop-up menu again, but this time instead of having the add button, you have a remove button. Okay. You also do have the ability to reorder the questions. So if you wanted this question near the top, you could click on reorder, and you can actually move the question to this point in the assignment where you want this. The other button you do have access to is called pool. So what you could do is go inside your question bank, pull out 3 or 5 or however many questions that are similar in topics to each other, and you can actually specify to the system, I'd like students to answer 2 of these 5 questions. And the system will randomly assign 2 of those 5 questions that you've chosen. So that may be particularly useful when you're writing a quiz or an exam inside Sapling, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So what I'm going to do is click remove the question. So let's say after working through this, you realize that question is not like the best question in the world. You want to get rid of that. So what I'm going to do is click remove. I'm going to get a warning screen. Are you sure you want to remove this question? What I'm going to do is go ahead and say remove item. And by removing that question, I've taken it out of my homework assignment. But if I go back to the question bank over here, it should be right there. There it is. So this is really important. Even though you remove a question from the assessment, you do not remove it from the question bank. So you can't hurt the question bank. All right. So what we've done is really step 1 of a 3-step process. What we're doing is choosing the questions that we want in our homework assignment and get the assignment to the point where we're okay with it. We're ready to go. We're ready to assign this to students. Step 2 of the process is to choose the grading settings for that assignment. To do that, what we're going to do is go up to the right-hand corner, and you're going to have this box right here that says grading settings. I'm going to click on this, and that's going to take us directly to our grading settings area, where you have 4 grading policies already in your account. So by default, everything's going to be using the Sapling homework policy, which means that students have unlimited attempts. They have a 5% penalty per wrong attempt. Students see the solution upon question completion, and then you can see resources like the ebook, data sets, simulations, stuff like that. Now, if you don't like that policy, you have no problem. You can go here to under custom templates and actually create your own custom policy. You would give this a special name and then choose the settings that you want to use for that particular assignment. What's really cool is that once you make a grading setting or a grading policy and you save it, you can always use that policy over and over again. And they actually stay in your account. So what you're looking at below, these are 3 individual policies I've used for 3 different courses. So every time you make a new policy, they stay with you. The other thing I want to point out about the screen is that we do have a policy that's already set up for a test or a quiz. Okay, so if you are thinking about you writing a test or deploying a test inside Sapling, we do have a test policy already set up in this course that you could use, or you can modify and make it your own. Okay, so that would be your second step in this process. Choose the grading policy that you want for your course. Finally, the third step is to assign the assignment. So the way I'm going to do that is to go back to the home page by clicking on the bar at the top left. So that takes us back directly to the home page. And this time I'm going to click the first button on the upper left-hand corner, the one that says activities and due dates. This is our bulk due date updater. So if you have a bunch of assignments ready to go and all at once, you can actually come here and assign it all at once. So what I'm going to do is find our assignment, and we've been checking out chapter 1. So here's the chapter 1 homework. What I'm going to do is go down this row, and the first drop-down menu is the grading policy. So let's say I did forget to set that grading policy. I can still come here and set that grading policy. That's not a problem. The second step is to set how many points you want to make this assignment worth. By default, everything in Sapling is worth 100 points. So you can change the number of points and set it however you'd like. Okay. Grade category, if you're going to use the Sapling Gradebook and you want to organize your grades based on categories, this is where you would try to classify that assignment. But more importantly, this is where you're going to choose when the assignment's made available and when is that assignment due. Okay, so this is your third step. Choose the amount of points that you want for that homework assignment, choose when the assignment's made available, and then when is that assignment due. Now, finally, the last two columns over here on the right-hand side of the screen, you have offsets and extensions. Offsets is when you have a student, when you have to give you're giving an exam, and let's say instead of 2 hours, the student is requiring that they need 4 hours or double time to take an exam. So you would click on offsets, and because there's no students in this course, there's no one to choose, but what you would do is choose the student on the left-hand side and then choose the due date, the new due date and due time for that particular assignment. And then finally, if we go back to that original screen that we were just on, extensions. If you need to give a student an extension on a homework assignment or an exam or a quiz, that's where you would do it. It's going to look very similar to that offset screen. All right. So yeah, so that is actually how we get an assignment, a homework assignment, live to students. Pretty cool. So like I said, for every chapter inside a Sapling Plus course, you're going to have 3 assignments. You'll have that learning curve activity, which again, that's pre-lecture. You'll have that reading quiz, which gives you absolute control on the questions if you don't want to use learning curve. And then you'll have that homework assignment. And ideally, we'd want you to use learning curve in tandem with that homework assignment. Learning curve gives students that foundation that they need to understand the text. The homework is testing those learning objectives. All right, it's time for our initial descent. So here's the next question. We talked about how the course is set up. We talked about learning curve and the homework assignment. What if you have to deploy a test or a quiz inside Sapling? The good news is that if you know how to work the homework assignment and choose questions and all that stuff, writing a quiz or a test inside Sapling is really just like making that homework assignment. So that is really awesome. The way you would do that is that you would choose which box or which chapter that you want to put the exam in. Now, at the bottom of each of these box or spots, you're going to have 2 drop-down menus, one that says add an activity and then one that says add a resource. So what I'm going to do is click on the add an activity drop-down box, and right on top, the first choice is assessment. So what I'm going to do is click on that link. Okay, so that's going to bring us to this screen where we're going to add a new assessment to this topic. And so the first thing we do is give this assessment a name. So I'm going to call this exam 2. Okay, so what I tend to do at this point is to ignore everything else on the screen, like the grade. the available from the due date. We'll take care of that in that final step. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the screen, and this time what I'm going to do is click on Save and Continue. What that does is now takes us into the assessment, where this is going to look just like that homework assignment. The only difference is we have no questions that in this assignment, and we've got to put some in. So you would click on that button that goes to the question bank, and you would go through the same process that you just did for the homework assignment. You would choose which questions you want to add to your homework assignment. Okay, so that's it. The other minor thing you want to take a look at, you want to think about, is that if you remember back on the assessment screen, we had that button over here in the upper right-hand corner that said grading settings. So you want to make sure that you're using either the test quiz function or create your own policy for exams that you'll use for creating that exam. Okay. So yeah, writing in a test inside Sapling or writing a quiz inside Sapling is a very straightforward process, not a problem. Now, here's the other issue that we got to think about too. If your department or your university or your college is telling you or mandating that you have to use some sort of lockdown browser for an exam, like Respondus or something like that, unfortunately, you can't use Sapling for those exams, but we got a workaround for you. So what you would do is access the catalog page and pull up the Macmillan Learning Test Bank. What that is a web-based test generator. You can create a multiple choice or an essay exam inside the test generator. Now what you would do is that once you got the test done, you would export that test onto your computer. Usually it downloads as a zip file, and then you would upload that package into your campus LMS, so that way you can take advantage of that lockdown browser. So keep in mind, if you are required to use a lockdown browser, we do have a special workaround for you. All right, very cool. So now we've gone through the initial descent, and now it's time to start landing. So before we call it, let's talk about some other functionality that's really important. Let's check out the Gradebook. At the home screen on the left-hand side of the page, you have a fourth button down is called Grades. Let's take a look at that. So this is where all of your grades are going to be kept inside the Sapling system. Now you do have the ability to export grades. And so if you go to the top of this Gradebook, right along the fourth, the penultimate tab right here is Export. So you can actually choose the assignments that you want to be exporting, and then you can export the file as either a TXT or a CSV file. CSV is the format that Excel will be able to read the most. Okay, so you can export grades outside of Sapling into Excel, and then you can choose to upload that into your campus LMS or not. All right, so that's also really important. The other thing I would strongly recommend for you is to go through the Sapling system and see what other additional resources are there. So you'll have, so for instance, in this particular course, you have animation activities, problem-solving videos. You may have interactives. You may have tutorials. So there's a multitude of stuff that's inside your Sapling Plus course. I strongly recommend to go through and check those things out, okay? And use them or make them available to students for them to study from, okay? So that being said, we're now getting to touchdown. All right, so let's just review what we've gone through. So we talked about basic Sapling functionality. We talked about the 3 assignments inside your Sapling course. Learning curve. We talked about the reading quiz, and we talked about a homework assignment that we strongly recommend that you would pair either the reading quiz or learning curve with the homework assignment. We talked about creating a test or quiz inside Sapling, and then we talked about some of the other functionality like the Gradebook. We talked about resources and all that